Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. You know me, I like to get a spectacular backdrop if I can. Well, I'm here in Mallorca with Škoda for the first drives of this, the Elroq. Now, I first saw this car back in October in Prague for its global reveal on a boat floating up and down the river, but finally I get a chance to drive it. It's the baby brother of the Enyaq, which is one of Europe's best-selling EVs. And straight off the bat, I think it looks fantastic. This may well be a spectacular backdrop, but it is quite windy, so apologies for any wind flutter on the microphone. I think from a styling point of view, Škoda are absolutely knocking it out the park at the moment, and this car is no exception. I actually first saw this car a couple of years ago now. I went to a reveal that Škoda did with just 5 outline models of cars that were coming in the next few years. I didn't know what it was called at the time, but the name Elroq is basically electric Karoq. So this is the electric replacement to the Škoda Karoq, which was a really popular car in its segment. As I said, it's the smaller brother of the Enyaq. Enyaq's quite a big car. This is that mid-size SUV format that's so popular and such a competitive segment that it's going into. Front-end styling, I really like. I'm loving the spec of this particular car. This dark blue is a beautiful color with the black trim. All the Škodas now have their name on the front rather than the old crest. And then from the headlamp point of view, you've got these 4 daytime running lights across the top, which is quite a nice signature as you're driving along. And then this light cluster here, matrix LED headlamps. So you've basically got side lights and headlamps there, the main matrix beam there, and then this is actually a turning light. So when you turn into a corner, it just helps illuminate round the corner a little bit. But I think it just sits really nicely on the front of the car. So front-end styling, I like a great deal. Moving down the side of the car, I really like this little bit of detailing here. It's just a side scuttle, but it stands out and I just like it. I don't know why, just looks really nice. A very big set of door mirrors. When you're driving, there's a little bit of wind hiss from these, but it certainly gives you a nice view towards the back of the car. And then it's riding on 20-inch alloys, this particular Sportline model. 20-inch wheels. It wasn't that long ago that they were just, you never saw a car with 20-inch wheels, and now mid-size SUV, and you've got 20-inch wheels. The ride quality and comfort, it's quite a softly sprung car. We'll experience that out on the road shortly, but I think from a wheel design, from the way the car sits, the ride height, I think it looks quite nice. And then finally, the rear view of the car, very much Škoda family looks. I quite like the design of this rear tail light, but it's just a clean design. There's some nice angles and edges. I love the roof rails, and then just the black privacy glass, black badging against the body color. Just, I think for me, that's my kind of spec. If we just pop the boot open, it's a 470-litre boot with the seats up, but what I love about what Škoda do is it is quite apparent that this car has been designed by people who actually use cars. There's so many little things. Škoda call it simply clever, and there's loads of them around the car. I'll try and show you as many as I can, but there's plenty in the boot. First up, you've got this little hammock. I don't know whether that's what they call it, but I've got my coat hanging in there. Just hangs above the boot space to keep things out the way. Underneath the parcel shelf, you've got this net, and that's where you keep your charge cables. That is a brilliant idea, because normally charge cables are either under the boot floor, so you can't access them if the boot's full, or flopping around everywhere. Love that. There's little places to store stuff, little cupboards and nooks and crannies. Another little cargo net here. You've got a floor with a second set of stowage underneath. It's just really, really useful. And then my favorite thing, shopping bag hooks. You know me, every time I review a Škoda, I'm absolutely swooning about the shopping bag hooks. You've even got a little 12-volt power socket there to plug stuff in. It's just very well designed, very well thought through. If only more car manufacturers would do that. Sometimes with these mid-sized cars, you think they're going to be bigger than they actually are. And they're quite a big footprint on the outside, and then you get in them and there's no passenger room at all. Not the case in the Elroq. I am a tall chap. Regular viewers to the channel will be bored of this, but I'm 6'3", 34 to 35 inch inside leg, and I have plenty of space. And I know I've got very long bottom part of my leg, so it might be sat on my seat bones a little bit, but for a normal human being, there's loads of room in here. You've got a really big storage bin to house stuff here, which I like a lot. I've got heated seats in the back of this Sportline model with my climate control. I've got blinds there, and then the trim in here. Now I guess there are 3 seats here, but the centre one is mainly more of a kind of an emergency seat. It's really for 2 adults. And then you've got a little thing to put your drinks in there. You can put a smartphone in there. You can actually, I think with this one, there we go, I knew you could do that. You can get in the boot if you need to, or you could use that as a ski hatch. Just really clever design. The only thing for me this car is missing is a pan roof. It is a bit dark in here without that, but yeah, rear passenger room, very good. Now, before I jump in, Škoda Simply Clever. There were days when you'd have to buy a Rolls-Royce Phantom to get that little umbrella in the door. Absolutely love that. Brilliant idea. I just love things like that. An umbrella in the door is such a simple, easy thing, but Škoda's just full of it. So, interior-wise, so I spent a bit of time with the car yesterday, just getting my head around it. And the first thing is I really like the quite simple design. I know this iPad-like screen sticking out the dash isn't going to be for everybody, and there is quite a lot of touchscreen in here, but there are some physical buttons down here to do some things, drive modes and so on, but most of your interaction with the car is through a touch screen, and that's going to not be for some people, I know. There's a really small little head-up display and front instrument binnacle just there with all of your key bits of information. And then from a driving position point of view, you can get a really nice driving position. These seats are really comfortable. But there's a few things in here I just think are really, really smart. First up, you've got lots of storage just in here. If I just lift this up, there's loads of sort of little partitions you can carry, lift that out. There's a little thing in here to store stuff. There's just really well thought out. And I was doing this yesterday looking at the car, and I saw this. And I'm like, what's that? I mean, first off, I thought it was like a power bank for a mobile phone, a little baby one. And then I realised, no, this is again simply clever. Any guesses what this is? Yep, it's a screen cleaner. I mean, you know how modern day touch screens just get covered with fingerprints. That's what that's for. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Again, designed by people who've actually used a car. Now, I want to pull up my phone just to chat about the different battery sizes in this car because it's a bit confusing. And to be quite honest, I can't remember it all. So, the Elroq comes in a 50, a 60 and an 85. And they describe the different battery sizes, but it's not quite as easy as 50 kilowatt hour, 60 kilowatt hour, 85 kilowatt hour, sadly. So the 50 is actually a 55 kilowatt hour battery, and that has 170 PS and will do 230 miles. The 60 is actually a 63 kilowatt hour battery, but it doesn't have actually 63, it's actually 59, because I guess they just save a little bit for battery longevity and so on. And that has 204 PS and will do 260 miles. And then this car that we're in is a Sportline 85, but it's not 85, it's actually 82, and actually it's net 77, and this one will do 360 miles and has 286 PS and 545 Newton meters of torque. So this is the performance version, if you like. It'll do 0 to 60 in 6.6 seconds. The two less powerful models, you're looking at like 8-9 seconds to 60. So they're definitely not performance variants at all. But I think a range of, now that 360 miles for this car is WLTP, so I think real world range, you're going to be in the early 300s probably, and certainly looking at the data we've got on this car, even though it's a press event, so it's being driven reasonably hard, I think that's a really interesting amount of range. It's got very low drag coefficient, just 0.26, helps it slip through the air. And then the final thing before we get driving, and that's the characteristic that I think a lot of you will like, is it's got rear wheel drive. The motor's at the back of this car, and that's quite unusual. I think a lot of cars these days, they're either front wheel drive or four wheel drive, but this motor's at the back, rear wheel drive EV, and you can feel that in the driving dynamics as soon as you start pushing on in this car. So let's go for a drive. So let's start the driving part by doing what you have to do in every modern day car, and that is turn the speed bong off. Now luckily Škoda have a shortcut that you can set in the MMI. There's like a top bar of navigation buttons, and one of those is the speed bong. Actually, it's all the different driver assist functions. So I'm just going to turn speed limit warning off, and I'm also going to turn lane departure assistance off and go back to me nav. I can drive the car now. Unfortunately, that is a regulation. All car manufacturers have it. It's just that some seem to make a better or quicker way of turning it off than others. Škoda's is all right. It's kind of in the middle. Winners, still Renault. Anyway, the second you start to drive this car, you'll notice a couple of things. Firstly, the ride is really, really plush. It's not floaty, it's just plush, and it rides the road surface really nicely. Second thing is it's very quiet. I've mentioned the door mirrors. At highway speeds, they do make a little bit of a hiss, but you would think with big wheels and big tyres that you'd get quite a lot of road noise, and actually you don't really. It's not too bad, and we'll see this kind of sleeping policeman here. You can kind of, it just goes over it really quite nicely. Rear wheel drive characteristics in the car, that might not be for some people, especially in the sort of wet and those types of things, but to be honest, this car doesn't have a massive amount of power to overwhelm the rear tyres. You've got to remember, yes, it's got a decent amount of horsepower, but this car does weigh around about 2 tons. The weight varies depending on the size of the battery that you have. I think though, the talking point in this car is price point, spec level, and range. It's going into a very competitive market with some really good cars that it's up against, and I think if we think about price point, so these are from £31,500. Now clearly that's the base spec small battery car. If you go like this one, which has got a big battery, high spec, it's going to be more than that, but it's still, I think, competitively priced in the marketplace. Range, everybody has a big thing about range in EVs. I think north of 300 miles in any car is good going, and this does reasonably fast rapid charging. I think it's about 175 kilowatt rapid charging if you can find a charger that fast, and that makes living with a car like this much more of a proposition because you can plug in a longer route. The sat nav, by all accounts, has some really nice features to find decent local charges. It ranks them in terms of speed, and then the other thing you can do, which will help with that longevity of battery but also the speed of getting your charge in the car, is you can precondition the battery, and you can do that again from those navigation buttons. So either you've plugged in a charge stop into the sat nav, or you can just precondition the car on the way to the charge station, and that will make the charging process much quicker and more efficient. Oh, little bit of traction loss on the inside rear as I accelerated full beans away from there. This is a lovely bit of road. As soon as you get up to the highway speeds, the car does actually start to ride really nicely and have a nice feel to it. I always struggle a little bit with cars like this because it's not a sports or performance car at all. It's just a really good family car, and I have to engage my family car buyer brain to think about the things that you would want. And I think Practicality is right up on the shopping list. It has a really good sized boot, as we've seen, lots of places to store stuff, really good space in the back for the kids or for passengers, and just a nice place to do a long journey. And I think that's one of the things that Škoda are just really, really good at. They think about their cars, they design them, and for me it all starts back to brilliant cars like Yetis and so on. And you see the little design cues that I love about Yeti all over this car. And actually we were talking to a couple of the Škoda guys last night, begging them to make a new Yeti to bring it back. In terms of really putting the range to the test, that's going to be quite difficult today. We've only got a small amount of time with the car, and it's, you know, it's currently showing 84% of battery and 383 kilometers. Well, you'd have to drive around Mallorca quite a lot to use up all of that battery. So I'd need to spend longer in the car to really put that range to the test. But I think if it can deliver north of 300 miles of range, then that will make this car attractive to a lot of people. Anything I'm not that keen on, the brake feels a little bit spongy. It works, and it's got, you know, lift off regen if you want it, and you can adjust that with the paddles on the back of the steering wheel. But that initial brake feel just isn't there for me. But if you really do need to stop and you push hard, the car stops absolutely fine. It's just a feel thing. I think looks-wise, the challenge I have with these cars is they all of the cars in the segment kind of start looking very similar. And with EV drivetrains, they're very difficult to differentiate. There's none of the character notes that you would find in an internal combustion engine car, you know, but whether that's engine noise or torque delivery or gearbox feel. You lose all of those things with an EV. You just end up in a car that does a really good job, gets down the road smoothly and quietly, but it makes differentiating it from other cars really difficult. I'm also driving the most powerful, highest spec version of the Elroq. I think if you were driving the 50 or the 60, I think you might be wanting a little bit more urgency in the car. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure it would have the power to overcome the weight, and I think it would just be a more dull car to drive. But that said, if you're just doing the school run and you're not wanting any performance, then that's probably absolutely fine for most people. At last, what looks like a nice bit of road. So I'm going to go into the drive mode selector and I'm going to put it up into sport mode and just see this. As I said, this isn't really a sports car, but on your way home from the shops, you might want to, you know, have a bit of fun. Throttle response is pretty good. It kind of bleeds the torque in nicely. If you stab on the gas, it doesn't instantly come in. It kind of bleeds it in nicely. It's the same when you pull away. And then you get up to the sort of top end and it just flattens off. The torque sort of dies away a little bit. Brakes, they're all right. They're a bit spongy to start with. I've got the minimum setting on the regen at the moment. Let me just put that up a little bit. So if I just put up to regen level 3, as I come off, that just pulls the car back a little bit. It's not too aggressive. Oh, this road's fantastic. Look at this. As soon as you start to build up a little bit of speed, the car settles down and sits into itself. I've mentioned the ride quality is so good and soft and plush, and you would think the downside of that would be that when you start chucking a 2-ton car around some corners, you start getting lots of body roll, and I don't feel that really. You feel the tyres complaining a little bit, but this tarmac is silky smooth and the ride quality is very, very good. Into this one, onto the brakes. It's a really lazy brake pedal just to start with, and then it starts to bite. And like all EVs, you just have to be aware of their mass. Yes, that mass is very low down, so we've got a centre of gravity that's nice and low. It's a skateboard design. The motor's on the back axle and then all the batteries along the floor. And that's brilliant for your centre of gravity, but it can lull you into a false sense of security because you have this really nice stable feeling car and you start to push on and push into corners but then physics takes over, and if you're not careful, my favourite phrase whenever I drive a car like this is, they handle all right up until the point that they don't, and by that time you're normally going so quickly that you're basically going to head to the scene of the nearest accident. But actually, on a nice bit of road like this car has really good road manners. Now clearly, if you drive enthusiastically like this, it's going to do terrible things for your efficiency and for your range. You're not going to get your 300 plus miles of range, but you are going to get to your destination with a smile on your face, and that's important. So yes, these EVs can be a bit plain and a bit vanilla and a bit difficult to differentiate from one another, but when you get them on a nice bit of road like this, they can still deliver driving feel. So although it's early days for the Elroq, I was talking to the guys from Skoda last night, they've already had over 20,000 pre-orders for this car, and I guess that's probably being driven by the success of the Enyaq, which is such a good selling car for Skoda. I'm going to back off now and just calm down. That was a fantastic bit of road. So I think the signs are really good for this car. I think it's priced really well, from early 30s to early 40s depending on spec. This is the biggest battery, most powerful one. This would be the car I'd go for. I think I would worry the two smaller battery, lower powered cars might feel a bit underpowered, but then if you're not into performance and you just want a nice family car with loads of practicality, that probably doesn't matter actually, and obviously the price point will be a bit lower. My general feelings of the car, I just love what Skoda do with cars. They're just so well designed. They've got some really nice, clever things in them. You open up the boot on this car and there's an ice scraper in the rear boot. There's, you know, an umbrella in the door. There's a little thing to clean the screens. Those little touches. I know they're little and some people will think, oh, that's not really all that special. They are just, it just shows that there's some thought gone behind the design of this car. I'd love to know what you guys think. Please put it in the comments below. I think it's going up against a very, very tough market. Things like the Kia EV3, which I've driven, which is a very, very good car, very similar in many respects, very well priced, good range, good spec, good equipment levels. And, you know, Skodas and Kias and Hyundais are really showing the traditional car makers, your BMWs and Mercedes and Audis, how to do it, because their equivalent cars are so much more expensive, and arguably I don't think they come with the same levels of basic spec. So yeah, an impressive car. You can have fun in an Elroq. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. And I'm going to carry on exploring Mallorca. It's December, but the weather's still quite nice. And I'm going to go home later today to a weather warning and storms. Deep joy. Anyway, let's see you on the next film, guys. You take care. Drive safe.